The stars had long forgotten Earth. Maps of the galaxy bore no trace of it, no coordinates, no memory, not even a rumor. As far as the known universe was concerned, humanity had been wiped out in the Great Cleansing over 1,000 years ago. The Ashari Empire, the final superpower in the galaxy, had made sure of that. But deep beneath the surface of a dead moon, cold, cracked and barren, something still moved. Something very human. His name was Commander Roan Maddox, and he had been born in darkness. Not the poetic kind. Actual pitch-black, oxygen-thin, death-breathing darkness. The facility was called Nova 7, and it had been humanity's last fallback after the fall of Earth. Built into the crust of a forgotten moon, it was a military bunker, a cryo-prison, a lab, and a graveyard all in one. Only a handful of humans had survived the extinction, frozen in biosleep, kept alive by forgotten machines and old military AI that refused to die. Roan was one of the unlucky few the system woke up into a war already lost. With nothing but anger in his veins, he stood now in front of a broken mirror, wiping grime off his face with shaking hands. His hair had grown wild, a mane of black curls tangled with sweat. His eyes burned, not with fatigue but with something primal, something the rest of the galaxy had long dismissed. He wasn't just alive. He was furious. "Report," he snapped. The AI that ran Nova 7 responded in a flat female voice. "Ashari ships detected. Long-range scans indicate low-orbit surveillance." "Standard recon pattern." Roan's jaw tightened. "How close?" "Too close." He clenched his fists. He remembered the stories his father used to tell. Stories passed down in code, hidden in old military files, encrypted and buried so deep that only humans could read them. Stories of how the Ashari burned Earth's skies with plasma fire, how they sterilized continents, erased archives and shattered cities just to make an example. They hadn't just conquered. They erased history, culture, bloodlines. They committed genocide on a galactic scale, and the galaxy cheered them on because humans were too chaotic, too emotional, too dangerous. That's what the Alliance had said. That's what the other races whispered behind closed doors. Everyone was complicit. The Ashari just had the stones to finish the job, or so they thought. Roan stepped into the central control chamber, surrounded by rusted metal, flickering displays, and cracked holoscreens. He stared at the planetary feed, a grainy visual of a glowing cruiser, drifting above the moon like a vulture. He didn't know what was worse, the rage or the hopelessness. "You're going to die down here," said a voice behind him. It was Lieutenant Cade Voss, one of the other survivors. Military intelligence, cold, calculating, and painfully blunt. His uniform was faded, torn, but he still wore it like it mattered. "I'm already dead," Roan muttered. "Then why are you still fighting?" Roan didn't answer. Not right away. Instead, he turned to the old war terminal, a relic of a time when humanity still had fleets, armies, and hope. He typed in a sequence, a fail-safe protocol known only to Alpha commanders. Something even the AI hesitated before acknowledging. "Project Retribution." "Don't be stupid," Cade said. "We have no fleet. No weapons, no allies. This isn't war. This is suicide." Roan stared at the blinking red confirmation prompt on the screen. "Then let it be glorious," he whispered, and he pressed Enter. Far beneath the surface, deep in the guts of the moon, something ancient stirred. Something no alien race had ever seen and lived to tell about. The last rage of humanity. Unchained, unforgiving, unstoppable. The walls of Nova 7 trembled, not from an external strike. No Ashari had fired yet, but from the activation of systems buried beneath the lunar crust for over a millennium. Deep reactors, once deemed unstable, came online with a shriek of ancient turbines and crackling plasma conduits. Lights flickered violently. Rust gave way to sparks. And in that moment, the dead moon breathed again. Roan stood perfectly still, the soft red glow of the activation terminal painting his face like blood. "Are you out of your goddamn mind?" Cade snapped, stepping forward, voice sharp with panic. "You initiated Retribution? You don't even know what the hell it does." Roan turned slowly, eyes cold. "You ever ask yourself why we were left behind, Cade? What? Why we weren't evacuated? Why Nova 7 was sealed up and buried like a coffin, while the rest of the colonies were wiped off the map?" Cade scoffed. "Because we lost. We were a contingency. And the Ashari hunted down the rest." "No," Roan said, stepping away from the console. Because the Ashari were afraid of what was buried here, of what humanity had started building right before the fall. Retribution wasn't just a weapon. It was the line we were never supposed to cross. Cade's eyes narrowed. You mean? Roan nodded. Pre-event tech. Before the Accord, before the Geneva II protocols, bio-integrated warfare, neural-linked AIs, smart weaponry bonded to gene-locked operators. The kind of stuff that got half the Senate assassinated when they tried to classify it. Cade went pale. Are you saying you just woke up a war crime? No, Roan said. I woke up vengeance. A low hum began to build in the floor beneath them. The air itself felt thicker, like it was pressing against their skin. Then came the voice. Not the AI, something else. Retribution protocols engaged, awaiting primary host. Roan stepped forward. The center of the control chamber opened, metal folding back like a blooming iron flower. From the hollow core, a suit began to rise. Calling it armor would have been insulting. It wasn't plated, it was alive. A swirling mix of matte black alloy and pulse-reactive mesh, the suit seemed to move on its own, reacting to Roan's proximity. Segments unfolded, blades tucked into hips, back slots held collapsed drones. The chest unit pulsed with a slow red heart, synced to Roan's own biometric signature. Cade took a step back. Jesus Christ! Roan said nothing. He let the suit scan him, spike a neural thread into his spinal port and begin the synchronization. The pain was instant, white-hot and sharp like 1,000 needles drilling into his spine and wrapping around his nerves. But Roan didn't scream. He'd learned to stop doing that years ago. The armor clicked into place. Primary host accepted. Commander Rowan Maddox. Identity confirmed. Retribution active. The lights across Nova 7 turned blood red. Cade stepped forward slowly, stunned. Do you even have a plan? Roan's voice came out deeper now, amplified through the suit's chest plate. Yeah, we make them remember. Above the moon, the Ashari recon cruiser drifted in low orbit. It was sleek, elegant, curved architecture, silver-blue plating, and powered by ion cores that hummed like a chorus. The Ashari were a race obsessed with control, precision, and legacy. To them, war wasn't messy, it was an art. Form clinical, predictable. And they didn't believe in ghosts. That's why Commander Vasrel barely flinched when the long-range sensors picked up an energy spike on the moon's surface. A mining drone, maybe? His second officer offered. Thermal residue matches early tech fusion cores. Vasrel narrowed his violet eyes. No colonies on that rock for centuries. That was a grave moon, a human one. There are no humans left, Vasrel smiled coldly. Exactly. Run a scan anyway. His officer nodded and turned to the console, engaging low-orbit probe, deploying scouts. But before the probe could even clear the docking bay, the ship trembled violently. What the— Impact! Someone shouted. Unknown projectile came from the surface. Vasrel's eyes widened. Shields? Bypassed. It hit us inside the propulsion ring. Targeted strike. That wasn't possible. No surface gun could do that. Not with such precision. Then the ship shook again, this time not from a hit, but from something landing, right on the hull. Roan stood on the Ashari cruiser's outer plating, the vacuum of space wrapping around him like a second skin. His suit filtered it all, oxygen, pressure, temperature. He barely even registered the void anymore. The Ashari hull hissed beneath his boots. Retribution systems gave him every advantage. A mental map of the cruiser unfolded in his vision, overlaid with weak points, structural diagrams, weapon placements. This wasn't just tech, it was war made personal. He crouched, then launched himself straight through the outer hatch. The impact shattered the emergency bulkhead. Alarms screamed. Artificial gravity distorted. Ashari officers turned just in time to see a demon descend. Roan's blades unfolded from his wrists. Sleek, vibrating with kinetic energy, they sliced through the air like razors. The first two Ashari barely had time to raise weapons before their torsos hit the floor. He moved like a phantom, fast, lethal, and merciless. A squad rounded the corner. He didn't even slow. The suit anticipated their shots, auto-pivoting to deflect plasma bolts with micro-shields. He grabbed one by the throat, slammed him into the ceiling, and used the corpse to block incoming fire. Then came the blood. Ashari blood was silver, like mercury. It splattered across the walls as Roan tore through the next squad, switching from blades to pulse launchers embedded in his forearms. The corridor became a slaughterhouse. He didn't feel guilt. He didn't feel doubt. He just felt rage. Back in Nova 7, Cade stared at the hollow feed in disbelief. The cruiser's hull integrity was dropping fast. Internal comms had gone dark, and the external cameras, what few still worked, showed one man tearing through a ship meant to hold 500. "You're watching history repeat itself," said the AI beside him. He turned. "What? Humanity did not lose the war because it was weak. It lost because it was feared." The AI's tone shifted. Less synthetic now, more human, older. "You see, Lieutenant Voss, the galaxy never learned how to fight humans. They only learned how to kill them. But war and extermination are not the same. What are you saying?" "I am saying that Commander Maddox is the first of many." Retribution was not a weapon. It was a seed. Cade's mouth went dry. "How many?" The AI's eyes glowed faintly. 72 more volts. Across 13 moons, hidden, sleeping, waiting for one signal. Which signal? Oh, new alarm blared. Ashari cruiser destroyed. Vasrel never saw the final blow. One moment, he was barking orders in the command chamber, trying to reroute power to the shields. The next, the floor beneath him cracked open, and a black armored figure rose like death incarnate. "No," he gasped, "it's not possible. You're extinct." Roan grabbed him by the throat. "You should have made sure." And then he crushed his windpipe, turned, and hurled him through the viewing deck's window into space. 30 minutes later, Roan stood on the drifting remains of the Ashari cruiser, smoke curling from the hull. He activated the comm beacon embedded in his glove. "This is Commander Roan Maddox. Humanity lives," he paused, "and it remembers." Roan sat alone in the hangar bay of the ruined Ashari cruiser, surrounded by broken metal, drifting bodies, and the distant hum of a collapsing power core. The stars outside were still, cold spectators to the carnage he had unleashed. His armor was coated in silver blood, scarred by plasma burns, but still humming with quiet rage. His breathing was steady, controlled, but the fire behind his eyes refused to die. The suit was syncing memories again. It had been feeding him data, raw intelligence pulled from the Ashari ship's network, scrambled encryption, intercepted transmissions, even fragments of official orders. And what it revealed made his stomach twist. This wasn't a recon mission. This wasn't random. The Ashari had known something was buried on the moon. They'd come to confirm it. And worse, they weren't alone. A broadcast had already been sent to a much higher command node, something called the Imperium Core. Roan clenched his fists. They would come, and this time, they wouldn't send one ship. "Commander," said the AI in his suit, her voice laced with urgency, "I'm detecting multiple warp signals. Deep range. Estimated arrival 26 hours. At least a cruiser fleet." "How many?" he asked. 6 confirmed capital-class ships. 2 destroyers. A known number of support vessels. Roan stood. The Ashari weren't wasting time. They were bringing enough firepower to glass the moon completely. They weren't coming to fight. They were coming to erase again, but this time it wouldn't be so easy. He opened a secure channel back to Nova 7. Cade's face flickered into the feed, jaw clenched, eyes bloodshot. He hadn't slept since Roan left. "They're coming," Roan said flatly. Cade nodded. "We saw the signal. Power spikes everywhere. They're not hiding it. We've got 26 hours. Prep everything." "I want the vaults open." Cade looked unsure. "All of them?" "All of them. That's a risk. We still don't know what kind of condition the systems are in. Some of them are unstable. Biochemical vaults, AI-driven tanks, prototype gear, never field-tested." Roan leaned closer to the feed. "They exterminated us once. We let it happen. We slept, we hid, we hoped. I'm not doing that again. Open everything." Cade hesitated, then nodded grimly. "Understood." Roan killed the feed. There was no going back now. Below the moon's surface, Nova 7 came alive in ways it hadn't since Earth still had oceans. Massive vault doors cracked open, hissing clouds of cryogas into the air. Robotic arms whirred into motion, unlocking sarcophagi of steel and carbon fiber. Human bodies, cold, stiff, preserved, stirred slowly under flickering lights. One by one they woke. Men and women who'd once worn the Earth Federation's black insignia. Soldiers, scientists, specialists, tacticians, all of them handpicked before the fall, all of them marked, For deep freeze in case of extinction. Many woke confused. Some screamed. A few dropped dead before they could stand, but others looked around with fire in their eyes. They remembered Earth. They remembered the day the skies burned red. They remembered the betrayal, the silence from the other races, the fake treaties, the staged negotiations that ended with orbital bombardments instead of peace. And when they were told that Roan Maddox had killed an Ashari cruiser single-handedly, they didn't ask questions, they suited up. "Commander," Cade said hours later, standing at the entrance of Vault 13, "you need to see this one personally." Roan approached. The doors had just finished opening, and the interior was different from the others, cleaner, more preserved. Cryosystems still perfectly active. The chamber wasn't full of soldiers. It had just one occupant, a young man, maybe 25, suspended in a full-body stabilization pod. No uniform, no rank markings, just a serial tag burned into his skin, Dido. Human Omega Protocol. Roan frowned. "That's not a designation I know." Cade stepped forward, voice low. "That's because it was redacted from military files just before the fall. I had to hack the AI's old neural banks to find it." "What the hell is it?" Cade looked him in the eye. "He's not a soldier. He's a weapon." The pod hissed open. Hours later, the young man sat in the command chamber, shivering under a thermal cloak. He didn't speak at first. His eyes were glassy, haunted, like he was stuck somewhere between a dream and a nightmare. Roan sat across from him, arms folded. "What's your name?" The man looked up slowly. "They called me Eli. You remember what you are?" Eli hesitated, then nodded. "They made me smart. Too smart. Neural implants. Reflex mods. Emotion dampeners." He looked down at his trembling hands. "They said I was humanity's last failsafe, that if everything else burned, I'd be the reset button." Roan stared at him. "Can you fight?" Eli looked up again. This time there was no hesitation. "I can kill." 24 hours before the Ashari fleet arrived, Nova 7 had become more than a bunker. It had become a war forge. Hundreds of survivors had reawakened, half in working condition, the rest still under repair. Old fabrication lines sparked to life, churning out weapons and armor long banned by interstellar law. Gunmetal black heat-reactive plating. Stealth systems that bent light itself. Smart guns coded to biometric DNA signatures. Humanity hadn't just prepared for extinction, it had planned for resurrection. Rowan stood in the heart of it all, watching soldiers spar in newly lit chambers. Engineers bolt cybernetic limbs onto veterans missing half their bodies. AIs reprogramming drones to swarm with kill-on-sight protocols. Cade walked up beside him, watching with grim satisfaction. "I don't know whether to be inspired or terrified." Rowan said nothing. He just stared ahead, because deep down, beneath the adrenaline and the fury, there was a darker truth gnawing at him. This wasn't a comeback, this was revenge, and revenge always cost more than anyone expected, far across the galaxy. Deep within the Ashari capital on the crystalline planet Vel'Raz, the High Command watched the wreckage of their destroyed cruiser with silent rage. The hologram replayed the final moments on loop, Roan's face visible as he slaughtered their troops, his voice echoing, "Humanity lives, and it remembers." Councillor Viel, the head of the Ashari military caste, stood at the center of the war table, his face twisted with disbelief. One man, one vault, and he crippled a warship. No one spoke. "Have we confirmed it's not a clone or some lost experiment?" His second-in-command shook his head. "All biological scans confirm it. Human, full blood, no alien traces. No implants outside natural tech. He's real." Vale's face darkened. "Then we made a mistake." He turned to the war ministers. "I want a sterilization protocol drafted. We burn the entire moon. I want orbital arrays, fusion lances, EMP webs. So I want no survivors. Not again." The ministers nodded, but one voice spoke out, soft, quiet, but sharp as a blade. "Is that fear I hear in your voice, Counselor?" Vial turned. The speaker was High Seer Talina, head of the Ashari spiritual caste, a slender, white-eyed woman with skin like polished obsidian and markings etched into her arms. "I fear nothing," Vial snapped. Talina smiled coldly. "You should. You hunted them. You slaughtered their worlds, and yet they return, not with diplomacy or apology, but with fire. You sound like you admire them." I respect the storm, Talina said, even if it burns us. Back on the moon, Roan stood at the edge of the command deck, overlooking the vast plains of cracked stone where the vaults had erupted open. Hundreds of soldiers now stood in formation, some barely awake, others armed to the teeth. Drones circled overhead, their AI linked to the lunar grid. Cade stepped up beside him, handing him a combat tablet. "Final numbers," he said. Roan scanned the screen. Active combatants, 486 support staff, 214 AI drones, 127 heavy artillery, 3 functioning tanks, defense grid, 43%. Operational air support, none fleet, 0. It was pathetic, but it was human and they were pissed. "You ready for this?" Cade asked. Roan looked at him. "I've been ready since the day they turned Earth into ash." The stars above began to shimmer, Ashari ships dropping out of warp. The war was coming, and this time, they wouldn't find a dying world begging for mercy. They'd find Roan Maddox, they'd find Eli, they'd find a species that remembered pain, that never forgot betrayal, and that had crawled back from the grave, not to negotiate, but to make the galaxy bleed. The sky cracked, not with thunder, not with light, but with silence. Cold, suffocating silence. Then came the streaks, long, white slashes across the upper atmosphere as the Ashari fleet dropped from warp above the moon, like executioners lowering blades. Rowan stood atop Nova 7's eastern defense platform, helmet in hand, eyes locked on the growing formation in the sky. The lead destroyer was massive, nearly a city in size, flanked by smaller warships and dozens of interceptors. Their formation was tight, aggressive. They weren't here to scan, to assess, or to negotiate. They were here to erase the past. "The truth, him," Cade's voice crackled over comms. "They're taking positions. No warning, no broadcast, no hails. Looks like they're planning to strike before they land." Roan's voice came through like gravel. "Cowards know what happens if we speak. You think they're afraid of what you'll say?" "No, they're afraid the galaxy might listen." There was a long pause. Then Cade whispered, "Good." Below the command platform, the human forces had assembled in full. The soldiers of Nova 7, reawakened from frozen dreams, bearing weapons that hadn't seen sunlight in 1,000 years, stood shoulder to shoulder, rifles braced, armor sealed, helmets locked. The old Earth Federation emblem had been spray-painted crudely across chest plates. A broken planet, wrapped in barbed rings of fire. They didn't look like an army. They looked like survivors who had run out of time, out of mercy, and most of all out of fear. Among them stood Eli, quiet, his expression unreadable. He wore no armor, only a neural weave combat suit with thin cybernetic lines snaking up his arms. His fingers twitched, like his mind was running faster than the world around him. He didn't blink. He didn't breathe heavy. He simply watched the sky, waiting. Roan descended to the command deck. "Status on the vault bunkers. Sealed and reinforced," replied one of the techs. "Non-combatants and the unstable cryopods are locked down. Secondary AI backups online. If we fall, the system auto-scrubs and buries everything." "Good. Let them find Ash." He stepped onto the central platform and activated the external comm array. The sound echoed across every comm unit, helmet, and speaker on the moon. "This is Commander Roan Maddox," he said. The soldiers stopped. Even the drones hovered still. "We've been asleep for too long. We let the galaxy forget who we were. We let them write us off, write us out. But we are not myths. We are not extinct. We are not echoes." He took a breath. "We are the broken, the betrayed, the ones left to rot on this rock. But we are still here, and we remember what they did to us. We remember Earth." He turned to face the massive Ashari warships, now casting shadows across the landscape. "And now, they will remember us." The first shot was silent, a pulse beam, brilliant and thin, sliced through the upper defense grid like a scalpel. One of Nova 7's outer towers exploded, scattering molten debris across the eastern plain. The Ashari weren't testing anymore. They were dismantling, shields holding at 67%, called the tech officer. "Grid can't take sustained barrage." Roan didn't blink. "We're not playing defense. Activate all ground cannons. Target destroyer engines. I want them bleeding before they hit ground." A dozen anti-air emplacements roared to life. Fire erupted from the plains, red and orange trails of plasma lashing into the sky. Ashari interceptors dove to engage, swarming like hornets. Explosions lit the atmosphere. Eli moved before anyone else did. He launched forward across the open field with no cover, no backup. Just him. He raised one hand and the suit around his body shimmered. Time didn't slow, but he moved faster. The neural implants burned hot in his skull, syncing with 1,000 calculations a second. 1. Ashari dropship turned to engage him. He leapt straight through the air and drove his arm through the cockpit before the pilot could scream. The ship crashed behind him as he kept moving. Roan watched from the field cameras, stunned even through the haze of battle. Eli wasn't just modified. He was designed. A human weapon that didn't need armor, didn't need tech. He was the answer to a question the Ashari had never wanted asked. What happens when you push humanity too far? The first wave of enemy infantry hit the ground hard, surgical pods burrowing into the surface, spilling out Ashari foot soldiers in gleaming armor. They moved like dancers, fluid and perfect, synchronized by group mind links. They were fast. Too fast, but not faster than vengeance. Roan dropped into the front line, rifle blazing. His suit, bonded fully now, predicted enemy movements, auto-aimed his shots, curved bullets with electromagnetic pulses. He didn't fight like a man. He fought like memory given steel. The Ashari fought in silence. The humans screamed for Earth, for the fallen, for their brothers frozen in vaults, for their families turned to dust, for the betrayal that had never been answered. And the Ashari, for all their grace and coordination, began to fall, their armor cracked. Their formations broke. Their silence shattered. One human soldier, grizzled, missing one eye, tackled an Ashari officer and beat him to death with a rifle stock while laughing through broken teeth. Another charged straight into an enemy turret, screaming, "This is for Shanghai." Before detonating his vest, Roan waded through the chaos like a storm. Blood, ash, fire. He didn't feel the burns on his neck. He didn't feel the broken rib. He felt something else, power. For the first time in 1,000 years, humanity wasn't running, it was fighting. Back in orbit aboard the Ashari command vessel, Counselor Vale watched the feed through gritted teeth. "How many?" he barked. The tactician trembled. 300 ground casualties. 2 destroyers damaged. Primary cannon disabled. Human resistance is unexpectedly coordinated. Vale slammed his fist into the console. "They were extinct." "No, sir. We were wrong. They weren't extinct. They were preparing." Vile turned to the weapons master. "Initiate bombardment. I want the entire southern hemisphere of the moon turned to slag, but our own troops are expendable. The message must be clear. The order was given." 10 orbital fusion lances began charging. Roan's Huddy screamed with warnings. "Incoming orbital strike," shouted the AI. "Evacuation impossible. Impact zones cover 40% of the battlefield." Cade's voice cut through. "Roan, we need to pull back." "They're not fighting anymore. They're erasing." "No," Roan growled. "Not this time." He activated his suit's deep link. "Eli, do you copy?" Eli's voice came through calm. "Yes, they're bringing fusion lances online. Orbital wipe." "We don't have interceptors. We don't have a fleet." Eli was silent for a moment. Then, "Maybe we don't need one." Within Nova 7's buried tech core, there was one system that had never been turned on. A final relic from Earth's secret research days. Codenamed Siren, it wasn't a weapon. It was a threat. A gravity pulse cannon designed to temporarily disrupt warp cores and force matter structures in orbit. Too powerful. Too unstable. Too human to be allowed. Eli entered the control room, skin pale, veins glowing with pulse light. He touched the panel. The machine knew him, and it obeyed. The pulse surged up through the moon's crust, silent, unseen. But in orbit, it felt like hell tearing open. The fusion lances fizzled. The warships jerked sideways as gravity reversed for 3 full seconds, sending crew slamming into walls and consoles. Systems shorted. Lights died. Counselor Vielle screamed, "What have they done?" His warship tilted into an uncontrollable spin, smoke pouring from its engines and on the moon. The humans charged again. Roan stood over the body of an Ashari captain, chest heaving, suit drenched in gore. His rifle clicked empty. He tossed it aside and grabbed a blade from a fallen soldier. No time for precision now, only vengeance. He met up with Cade, who was dragging a wounded sniper to cover. Cade grinned. "You're still alive. I owe Eli 50 credits. Roan coughed blood. You're paying me double if we win this. Win? Cade laughed bitterly. Brother, we're not supposed to win. Roan met his eyes. I know. Then why are you still fighting? Roan looked to the sky. Because he wasn't fighting to win, he was fighting to be remembered. Because if humanity was going to burn again, it would burn screaming. The battlefield was soaked in ash and blood. Smoke choked the sky. Bodies, human and Ashari, lay scattered across the cracked plains like forgotten toys of ancient gods. The distant moans of the wounded echoed between the shattered husks of defense towers, broken tanks, and half-melted drones. The war wasn't over, but it was changing. Roan knelt beside the body of Corporal Reese, the youngest of the reawakened units. Just 19 when cryo took him, now lying cold with a hole burned through his chest plate, eyes wide, still staring at the stars he never got to live in. Roan closed the boy's eyes with one hand. No speeches. No tears, just fury. Behind him, Cade approached, limping heavily, blood seeping through his side. We held them back. Barely. That gravity pulse gave us time, but now we're bleeding out. We lost half of Alpha Company. Gamma's gone. The drone network is down to 40% efficiency. Ammunition's running low. Roan stood up slowly, and the Ashari, 2 warships crippled. One destroyed. Eli took it out with a redirected lance, but their reinforcements are already inbound. New contacts entering the system. Fleet strength just tripled. Roan's jaw tightened. They were losing. Not in spirit, but in math. In physics. In the cold calculus of war, humanity was running out of blood to spend. We need to evacuate the vault, Cade said grimly. At least preserve the kids in cryo, the scientists. Hell, even the AI. If we die here, everything goes with us. Roan didn't answer immediately. He stared at the war map, flickering with red zones. So much loss, and it wasn't enough. They hadn't made them pay enough. Then the comm unit on his gauntlet buzzed. A secure channel, encrypted. Roan frowned. Only one person could open that channel. He stepped aside and answered. Eli, he said. The voice came through, calm, cold, and unnervingly detached. There's a problem in Vault 9. Vault 9 was deep, cut off from the rest of Nova 7 by security layers only command-level personnel could bypass. Originally listed as a research storage wing, it hadn't been prioritized during reactivation. Until now, Roan descended with Cade and 2 remaining heavy guards. They found the first dead body at the entrance, shot in the back. One of their own. No Ashari Roan's stomach sank. He pushed deeper, and that's when they found the betrayal. A door, half open, a flickering console, and standing inside, arms raised in surrender, was Lieutenant Emmerich Rell, one of the original cryo-awakened officers. Next to him stood 2 Ashari envoys, unarmed. Their armor painted white with surrender glyphs. Roan raised his weapon immediately. Drop to your knees, Emmerich didn't move. Roan, listen to me. This isn't what it looks like. You're standing next to the enemy. They're envoys, diplomats. They came down without weapons. Cade's voice was like acid. We've been fighting for our lives for 36 hours, and you're playing politics. They came to negotiate. Roan barked a laugh. Negotiate what? Terms of surrender? Emmerich looked desperate now. Terms of survival. We can't win this, Roan, you know it. They're bringing more ships. Whole fleets. We're outnumbered, outgunned. This is extinction all over again. Roan didn't lower his weapon. One of the Ashari envoys stepped forward, hands still up. Her voice was soft but clear. We offer a ceasefire. We underestimated you. The Council. They thought you were primitives, remnants, but you are not. You are alive, Roan finished. She nodded slowly. And that frightens them. Roan stared at her. A long, tense silence. Cade leaned in. Roan, this stinks. The only reason they'd want to talk now is because they're scared. But scared people don't surrender. They stall. They wait for the bigger knife, Roan agreed. But he also knew time wasn't on his side still. Something felt off. He stepped closer, his rifle still raised. You were inside our vault. How did you get past the lockdown fields? The Ashari envoy glanced nervously at Emmerich, and that was all Roan needed. He fired one shot. Emmerich dropped, blood spraying from his temple. Dead before he hit the floor, the 2 Ashari screamed, but the guards already had their weapons drawn. No, one shouted. Please! Roan silenced him with another shot to the head. The second envoy fell to his knees, sobbing. Roan stood over him, rifle steady. You burned Earth, he said coldly. You erased cities, children. You sterilized continents because your empire couldn't handle resistance. Now you want to talk? The envoy wept, truly wept. I didn't do that. I wasn't born then. I don't even believe in the cleansing. Roan stared at him. But you serve the people who did. The envoy nodded, broken. I didn't have a choice. Roan raised his rifle. You still don't. Later, Rowan stood outside the vault, his armor spattered with fresh blood. Cade sat against the wall, lighting a stolen Ashari stim stick with shaking hands. That's it then, Cade muttered. No more diplomacy. Roan didn't answer, because deep down, he already knew. There had never been any. Not when you're human that night, if it could still be called night. The humans buried their dead under the shattered field outside Vault 1. No names. No headstones. Just rows of helmets planted into the soil like grave markers. Roan stood in the silence after, staring at them one by one. The fire had dimmed in many of the men. The rage was still there, but the weight of it had turned into something heavier. A realization. They weren't coming back from this, not all of them. Eli appeared beside him, wordless. Roan looked at him. You have something? Eli nodded. I found the last failsafe, hidden in the siren system. What kind of failsafe? Earth's final message to the galaxy. Roan raised a brow. Eli continued. It was never about just surviving. Nova 7 was a weapon and a warning. If we couldn't win the war, we were meant to break the truth wide open. He handed Roan a data chip, everything. The Ashari's crimes, the footage, the labs, the sterilization orders, the erased treaties, the fake war trials. We have it all. Roan stared at the chip. It felt heavy in his hand. If we broadcast this, the galaxy will have to choose, Eli finished. Stay blind, or remember. Roan looked out over the battlefield. He saw his people, his blood, his brothers and sisters standing in the ruin of what should have been a tomb. He gripped the chip tighter. We'll make them see, he whispered. But as he turned to leave, Cade jogged up, face pale. We've got another problem. Roan felt a fresh ache in his gut. What now? Cade handed him a tablet. Ashari fleet just warped in reinforcements from the Dominion. Not just standard forces, elites, commanders, exterminator class. Roan read the list. It was worse than bad. It was genocide on legs. They're bringing their legends now, Cade said. We won't survive another full assault. Not without something bigger than that pulse cannon. Roan stared at the sky, and for the first time since waking up, he felt cold again. Not fear, but that quiet, familiar numbness of accepting you were already dead, and that the only thing left was what you do before the end. He turned to Eli. Can the siren cannon be redirected? Eli frowned. What do you mean? Can we fire it? Through the vault. Channel the energy through the core of the moon. Use the crystalline matrix under the crust to amplify the wave. That would rupture the entire surface. Chain reaction. Kill everything topside, Roan nodded, including the Ashari landing forces. The entire fleet in low orbit. Eli blinked. You're talking about a suicide blast. I'm talking about making it cost them everything. Eli hesitated, then nodded. I'll get it ready. And just like that, the last plan began. Not a counter-offensive, not a Hail Mary, but a funeral, one that the galaxy wouldn't forget. Because when the end came, humanity wasn't going to vanish. It was going to scream, burn, and drag its enemies into hell with it. And then it was going to tell the truth to everyone. The last morning on the moon came without light. The ash clouds had thickened into a blanket that choked the sky, turning the horizon a dull gray-brown. Nothing glowed. Nothing sparkled. Just dust and silence. The sun had given up trying to shine here, and yet Nova 7 was awake like a monster rising from the depths one final time. Roan stood in the central operations room, looking at the live feed of the Ashari fleet above them. There were now 27 ships in total, warships, cruisers, planetary sterilizers, and something else, something new, a flagship, twice the size of anything else, its hull black as obsidian, no markings, no signatures. Silent watching. Roan could feel it even from the ground, like the judgment of a god staring down. Cade entered behind him, armor half-buckled, jaw clenched, pain behind his eyes. They've deployed planetary hammers. Ground shakers, 3 landing points confirmed. They're preparing to glass the surface and collapse the vaults in one go. Roan didn't flinch. Let them try. You sure about this plan? Cade asked, voice low. You pull the trigger on that cannon. It'll kill every last one of us. There's no fallback. No escape, Roan nodded. That's the point. Cade exhaled slowly. You know, I didn't wake up from cryo expecting to become part of humanity's last suicide note. Roan cracked a faint smile. You're not. You're part of its final message, Cade laughed bitterly. Same difference. Then he stepped forward, lowering his voice. Listen, we still have 3 dropships buried in the sub-hangar. They're old, but one of them might make it to the edge of the system. We could send a team. Let them carry the data out. Make sure the rest of the galaxy sees what we found. If this whole thing fails, at least someone survives. Roan looked at him for a long time. I already picked someone for that. Cade blinked. Who? Roan didn't answer, because the answer was already walking toward the hangar. Eli sat in the cockpit of the last surviving stealth dropcraft, checking the status feed. Engines sputtered but held. Cloak systems at 62%, fuel at 48%. Enough for one jump to the nearest neutral system, where transmission satellites still ran their silent cycles, scanning for signals in the void. The chip, humanity's final truth, rested in a reinforced case beside him. The guilt sat even heavier. Roan had ordered him to run, not because Eli couldn't fight, but because Roan needed someone to survive. Someone built to survive, and that made it worse. He opened the rear hatch and saw Roan walking in, helmet under his arm, armor streaked with blood and oil. You sure you want to use this thing? Eli asked quietly. Roan nodded. You're the only one who can fly it without triggering every sensor in the Ashari grid. Eli hesitated. I could stay. Help power the cannon. Guide the AI link. You've done enough, Roan said, stepping forward. You already gave us a chance. Now give us a voice, Eli frowned. What about you? Roan shrugged. Someone has to pull the trigger. Eli stood. The 2 men faced each other for a long moment. No rank, no command. Just 2 broken sons of Earth, staring down the last fire together. Then Eli reached into his coat and pulled out a small object, a metal ring. Dull and scratched. I found this in Vault 5, belonged to a girl named Naomi Maddox. I thought you should have it, Roan froze. The name hit like a hammer to the ribs. Where? In the personal archive box. She had a journal. She wrote about you. Roan took the ring with shaking hands. He remembered Naomi, his sister, 10 years old when the Ashari glassed New Boston. She hadn't been listed on any cryo manifest. He'd assumed, like so many others, she'd been vaporized with the city, but she'd made it somehow. She'd been buried in the same vault he walked over 100 times. His hand closed around the ring. The last family he didn't know he still had. I'll get the truth out, Eli said quietly. No matter what it costs. Roan looked at him, eyes glassy but burning. I know you will. The cannon chamber was a monster of steel and heat, a mile beneath the surface. It sat coiled like a viper, the siren array, a pre-fall weapon system designed to rupture orbital formations through gravitational resonance. Too dangerous to build, too powerful to ever test, and now humanity's final hope. Roan stepped into the primary control sphere, surrounded by glowing consoles, cables the width of his torso, and 6 fusion cores humming at near critical. The AI spoke softly. System integrity is marginal, 1 firing sequence only. Probability of success, 43%. Good enough, Roan muttered. Warning, primary user will not survive the activation. Chain reaction is expected. Core detonation irreversible. Noted. He inserted the command key. The room vibrated. Outside, the moon began to hum. Cade stood at the surface command station, watching the sky grow red. The Ashari ships were descending now. Dozens of dropships, planetary siege rigs, terror-warping drills. It wasn't a war, it was execution, and they had no idea what waited beneath them. Eli's away, a tech confirmed. Signal clean. No intercept. He's gone dark, Cade nodded. Then light the fire. Roan's fingers hovered over the final command. His thoughts were a chaos of images. His sister, smiling at the beach, the screams when the cities fell, the faces of soldiers who followed him into fire. Cade's sarcasm, Eli's eyes, Earth, burning. He closed his eyes, then pressed the button. The first tremor cracked the crust. A second pulse shattered rock across half the moon's surface. Above, the Ashari ships started to shudder. On board their command deck, Counselor Vaya looked up from the feed. "What's happening?" An officer screamed. "Gravity spike, planet core instability." And then the cannon fired, not with light, not with sound, with pressure. The wave was invisible, but not to the ships above. Engines ruptured, warp cores buckled, weapons imploded. One by one, the ships folded in on themselves, collapsing under their own mass. The flagship, the pride of the Ashari, tried to jump away. It got as far as 600 kilometers before vanishing into its own void. The sky went black. On the surface, the shockwave flattened everything. Every human structure, every defense tower, every soldier who remained. Cade saw it coming and smiled. Roan saw the systems overload and closed his eyes. They didn't scream, they didn't run, they simply faced the fire. Half a system away, Eli's dropcraft cleared the final gravity well. He watched the feed cut out, saw the last transmission end. A moment of silence passed. Then he transmitted the file, not just the truth, everything, the war crimes, the erasures, the footage of Roan in his final moments, the speech, the ring, the names of every lost city, the voices of the survivors, the children frozen in Vault 12, the AI logs, the destruction of the Ashari fleet. He didn't know who would listen, but someone would, and that was enough. Back on Vel Ras, in the Ashari capital, chaos had already begun. The live feeds from the fleet had gone black. Emergency transmissions were flooding in. Whispers turned to screams. The unkillable humans, the forgotten army, the moon that fought back, and then the data drop hit the net grid, untraceable, unstoppable. Millions saw it at once. The truth, the genocide, the lie, and one phrase echoed across every screen: "We are not extinct. We are the fire you buried, and now we burn back." The silence after the last battle was heavier than any roar of war. It wasn't peace. It was the eye of a storm, the space between horror and finality. A breath before the end, a blood-soaked inhale before the scream. Roan Maddox stood in the shattered ruins of what had once been the central uplink of Nova 7. His armor splattered with soot, coolant, and too much blood to separate by species. His pulse hummed through the feedback sensors in his suit. One of his ribs had cracked. His right leg armor was scorched to hell. His voice was shot from barking orders for 16 hours straight. But his eyes, they were clearer than ever. "Status," he growled as Cade limped into the room behind him, one arm clutching a field dressing across his ribs. "Status is grim," Cade answered, trying to breathe through a punctured lung. "They're pulling back, briefly, probably regrouping for a final push. Maybe they're waiting for the flagship to arrive." "They didn't need it to kill us," Cade grimaced. "Yeah, but they want the theatrics." Roan looked up at the cracked ceiling, where the sky was visible through the splintered dome, clouds of smoke choking out the stars. Only one star shone through, flickering in the distance like a dying candle. He stared at it, not for beauty, not for symbolism, but because he wondered if anyone out there was watching, if anyone would see what was about to happen, if anyone would care. "They're not just trying to kill us," Roan muttered. "They want to erase us again." Cade nodded grimly. "If they take this moon, they'll destroy everything. The data, the AI, the frozen vaults. It'll be like we never woke up." Roan's jaw clenched. "Then we make it unforgettable." "You mean the cannon?" "I mean everything." Far beneath the surface, the siren core rumbled. No alarms, no flashes. Just a vibration, like the moon itself was remembering something, something violent, something forbidden. Eli stood at the main console, tapping through screens of data, each more horrifying than the last. Siren was not built as a weapon in the conventional sense. It didn't fire projectiles. It didn't launch missiles. It unstitched reality. Using raw gravitational force, it could turn an entire planetary orbit into a blender, ripping apart mass from the inside, boiling ships in their own fields, collapsing stations, even tearing moons apart if overcharged. It was, in a way, the last scream of a dying empire. And now, they were going to use it. Roan's voice crackled over the chamber comms. "Report," Eli responded, eyes glued to the sequence. "Charge is at 72%. Full capacity in 17 minutes. Containment is holding, but barely." Roan didn't hesitate. "Prep the override keys. We'll activate on my mark." You understand what happens when we fire at that output? Eli asked quietly. Roan was already walking toward the vault chamber. Yeah, Eli paused. There won't be anything left. No signal, no survivors. The entire moon becomes shrapnel. That's the point. Eli's voice hardened. You didn't tell them, did you? Roan stopped. No, you think they deserve that? To fight and die for a plan they don't even know ends with their annihilation? Roan turned slowly, voice low, dark, tired. They're already dead. They knew it when they woke up. Eli's face twisted. You sound like them. The Ashari. The ones who wiped out Earth and told themselves it was mercy. Roan stepped forward, rage flashing in his eyes. Don't you ever compare me to them. Eli didn't flinch. Then tell them. Roan didn't answer. He turned his back and left the chamber in silence. The War Council was held in what was left of the cryo wing, the room reeking of Thor fluid and ozone. 20 soldiers gathered, some missing limbs, others leaning on weapons like crutches. Cade sat at the head, pain making his face twitch. Roan stood in front of them all. They're bringing the flagship, he said without emotion. It's the same one that hovered over Earth during the cleansing. The same one that launched the initial pulse over the Pacific. Murmurs, curses. Someone slammed their fist against a metal table. They're not just here to win. They want to finish what they started. Cade coughed, then stood despite the pain. So we let them land? We let them bring their gods down to the dirt? Roan nodded. We're going to make them feel it. He paced the ruined chamber. Sirens ready. When they get close enough, we fire it. But the blast radius is total. Full surface annihilation. Someone's face fell. Another swore under their breath. Wait, one soldier said. We'll die. Roan nodded once. No evac, no dropships, no safe zones, no miracle escape routes. Silence. Real silence. Then the same soldier asked, and what do we get for it? Roan looked at them all. You get revenge. Another pause. And the galaxy? Someone else asked. They'll see, Roan said. Eli's voice came over the intercom. The broadcast channel is ready. When Siren fires, it'll push the signal across the net grid. The whole truth. Every atrocity. Every file. Every lie they ever told about us. Roan turned to them all. This isn't survival. This is a message. One of the veterans chuckled bitterly. Damn right it is. Roan gave them a final nod. You want to leave? Go now. No one will stop you. No one moved. Not even a twitch. Then Cade muttered, Guess it's a good day to be human. The flagship descended like a prophecy. Its hull blotted out the sky. Entire sections of it looked alive, shifting plates humming with light, weapons glowing along its massive ridges. It hovered silent, waiting. The last voice they'd ever hear echoed from it. This is the Ashari Supreme Vessel Zereth. Cease resistance. Lay down arms. This is mercy. Roan stepped onto the open battlefield, armor scuffed, face bare, a transmitter. In hand, he pressed the button. This is Roan. Maddox, Earthborn, Vault-woken, he looked up at the god that thought it could erase. Them, come and get us. Zereth opened fire. Planetary. Disruptors began to charge. Eli activated the siren ignition code. Roan and Cade ran side by side toward the center line of the field. Bullets tore past them. Ashari squads descended, and still Roan ran because he had one more thing to do. They reached the cannon control room. Eli stood at the panel. Hands trembling, Roan approached. You ready? Eli looked at him. Are you? Roan didn't answer. He reached into his chest plate, pulled out the ring, Naomi's ring, and placed it on the console. This is for her. Eli nodded. He input the final code. Siren fully charged. Awaiting final command. Roan turned to Cade. Cade was bleeding from the mouth now. Barely standing. You're going to say something noble. Cade asked, voice weak. No, Roan muttered. I'm just glad I didn't have to do this alone. Cade smiled, cracked and broken. Yeah, me too. Roan turned to the console, placed his hand on the final key. The AI whispered one last warning. Final command will initiate full core overload. No reversal. Confirm? Roan didn't blink. Confirmed. He pushed down. The sky peeled open. Light. Sound. Vibration. The siren. Core unleashed its scream. Ashari ships buckled. The flagship twisted. Gravity itself shattered. And the moon began to tear itself apart. Aboard Zereth, Councillor Vael screamed as the ship cracked down the center. He saw the Earthborn face on the last screen before the feed died. Roan, smiling. we remember. In the cold void between stars, Eli's escape ship drifted alone. He watched the moon explode behind him. Bright, beautiful. Terrible. He didn't cry, he simply uploaded the final file, and then whispered to no one. They thought we were extinct. But extinction makes no sound. He activated the beacon, and humanity screamed. They watched the explosion from dozens of systems away, freighter captains in deep space corridors, miners clinging to remote rock colonies, border patrols floating in the emptiness, bored out of their minds, traders, smugglers, pirates, farmers on artificial moons, diplomats sipping rare liquors in orbital salons. All of them, for one brief moment, stared at the impossible. The moon cracked, then vanished in a burst of light that didn't look like any nova or fusion bomb they'd seen before. It was cold, calculated, precise, not natural, human, and just as quickly. A message followed, not a distress signal, not a plea, a broadcast unencrypted, undeniable, unstoppable. It carried a name, Roan Maddox. It carried images of Earth, of the fall, of Ashari vessels sterilizing continents, of secret orders signed by high-ranking officials who'd once stood on trial and walked free. It showed the internment vaults, the experiments, the erased history, the betrayals, and then it ended with his voice. We are not extinct. We are the vengeance you left in the dark. You came to erase us, and we let you think you did. But we were waiting, and now we are not asking for a place in your galaxy. We're taking our place back, by fire or by memory. Humanity lives, and it remembers. Then the screen cut to black. The galaxy stopped and the fractures began. On Vel Ras, capital of the Ashari Imperium, a storm unlike any in history broke loose within hours. The council chamber erupted into chaos, nobles screaming, generals slamming data pads onto tables, security scrambling to shut down local networks as the video spread like wildfire. The planetary net grid was flooded. Every feed, every screen, every public terminal flickered with pieces of the transmission. Ripped, downloaded, shared, archived. The truth, the very existence of the message was enough to cause riots. The Ashari government had built an empire on the idea that the Great Cleansing was necessary. That Earth was a threat. That humanity had destroyed itself with chaos and aggression. That they'd been put down for the safety of all. But the truth? The truth was calculated genocide, concealed trials, suppressed footage, intergalactic manipulation of every major race to ensure silence, a complete rewrite of history with the Ashari as saviors, not butchers. And now that illusion was crumbling, shattered by the voice of a long-dead man and the roar of a cannon that tore through lies as easily as it did. Metal Councillor Vile was dead, his flagship torn in, half over the moon. With him died the strongest war faction voice in the Imperium. In the sudden power vacuum, 3 new voices rose, and none of them agreed on what should happen next. High Seer Talina, the spiritual head of the Ashari caste system, appeared before a gathering of billions via hologram. Her white eyes looked haunted. "I will not lie to you," she said softly. "We did this. We all did. Even those of us who claim we had no part in it. We allowed it. We let them erase the screams. We let them paint humanity as monsters while hiding our own claws." The silence that followed wasn't shocked, it was ashamed. In contrast, Admiral Kelv, rising from the military council, snarled into a sea of microphones and digital reporters. "The transmission is a lie, fabricated by AI seeded with false data. These are the remnants of a dead world. Terrorists with no place in our galaxy. They seek to divide us, to shame us into paralysis. They murdered an entire Ashari fleet. That is not justice. It is savagery. And savages must be buried." Some cheered, others turned away. And on a neutral system, far from the chaos, drifting in a slow, calculated orbit around a dead gas giant, Eli sat in the cockpit of a stolen Ashari courier vessel. He had removed the insignias, burned the seats, gutted the logs. The only thing he kept was the long-range comm array because he needed to watch. He needed to know what came next, and part of him hated that he did. Roan had died to send a message, and now Eli was the only one left to answer it. He'd been drifting for 3 days in silence, long enough to lose track of real time. Long enough for the wait to catch up. He didn't sleep, didn't eat much, just watched the galaxy react in real time. Protests, fights, arrests. investigations. On at least 3 Ashari colony worlds, soldiers fired on civilians who refused to stop chanting. "We remember Earth." The phrase had become a virus spray-painted on city walls, whispered in back alleys, broadcast in pirate radio stations orbiting nowhere planets. It wasn't just anger, it was doubt. And doubt was how empires died. Eli didn't expect the knock. The ship had been set to ignore all docking requests, stealth protocols engaged, firewalls in place. So when a soft human knock echoed from the rear airlock, he froze, gun in hand, pulse elevated. He moved down the narrow corridor toward the hatch. A moment passed, then another. He opened it and stared into a face he didn't recognize. Woman, late 30s, brown skin, short-cut hair, military tattoos faded from her collarbone, unarmed, but her eyes were heavy. She raised both hands slowly. "My name's Commander Mira. Rel Earthborn, Vault 18. Eli lowered the gun slowly. "That vault was never confirmed to have survivors." She smiled grimly. "And yet, here I am." Mira explained everything over dried rations and bitter coffee. Vault 18 had been buried so deep under Martian bedrock, it took 30 years for the recovery AI to fully awaken its systems. Only a few dozen had survived, and fewer still were combat-ready. Most had integrated with backwater colonies, hiding in plain sight, watching, waiting. "We intercepted your signal," she said. "We were underground when it happened. Saw the footage. Saw Roan. I served with him. He didn't remember me, probably. I was logistics." Eli sipped his coffee. He remembered more than he let on. Mira looked at him, and Eli finally asked the question that had been tearing at him since the moon died. Was it worth it? Mira didn't answer right away. She looked at the stars, then she nodded. "They tried to make humanity a ghost," she said. "But ghosts don't scream." By the next solar week, Eli had become a name, not by choice, but by absence. The NetGrid started calling him the last voice. Some thought he was a myth. Others believed he was an AI generated by Roan himself. A final vengeance algorithm. Only a few knew the truth. That Eli had started contacting colonies, not to start a war, but to share memory. Cause. To upload the evidence to neutral archives. 2. Meet quietly with Ashari defectors who couldn't live with the blood on their names anymore. To find others like Mira, to find out how many pieces of humanity were still out there. And slowly. They came not in armies but in whispers. Veterans with old scars, pilots, with rusted ships, children of vault survivors who had never seen Earth but carried its rage like inheritance. The Ashari called it terrorism. The galaxy called it awakening, and, in the shadows of the dying empire, someone else watched. From the throne chambers of the Valk Syndicate, an interstellar crime empire that had thrived under Ashari blind spots, a man known only as Thorn played the broadcast again. Roan's face. Eli's signal. The explosion. He turned to his aides. "Find him," Thorn said. "If he's alive, he's valuable. Ali?" Thorn grinned. "No, but useful." He leaned forward. "This is the first real shift in power in 100 years. And when new powers rise, new kings get made." He raised a glass. To the ghosts of Earth. Eli didn't want to be a leader, but the galaxy had stopped giving him choices. So he became something else. A node. A signal. A carrier of fire. He didn't promise justice. He didn't preach war. He only made them remember. And as more vaults flickered online, as more forgotten colonies whispered the old names of lost cities, as more non-human species began asking questions about the Ashari version of history, the tide turned, not in fire but in doubt, and that, Eli knew, was more dangerous than any weapon, because once the galaxy questioned the truth, it could never go back. The explosion had ended in silence, not just on the moon. Across the entire system, across the galaxy, ships halted mid-transit. Trade routes froze, diplomatic channels overflowed, and somewhere in the darkness between systems, one ship drifted alone. Eli sat in the pilot's seat of the stolen Ashari courier craft, his hands trembling faintly on the controls. His pupils were wide, as though still trying to absorb the last moments of what he'd witnessed. Roan Maddox standing at the mouth of the end, eyes unblinking, voice unshaking, right hand pushing the ignition. That turned a dead moon into the loudest scream. humanity had ever made, and Eli had lived. That single truth echoed louder than the cannon. Blast, he lived. And now he was carrying something heavier than any warhead. Memory. The beacon had fired flawlessly, just before the moon was torn apart. The siren cannon, bound to Eli's neural link, had carried the full archive of Earth's final defense, Roan's broadcast, the classified Ashari documents, the sterilization orders, the erased footage from Earth's last days, the voice of every dead human who had been silenced. Within an hour of the explosion, it was everywhere. Every neutral colony received it. Every pirate station, every fringe AI satellite, even a few Ashari outposts whose firewalls were breached from the inside. It wasn't just viral, it was viral justice. The broadcast repeated every 32 minutes. We are not extinct. We are the fire you buried, and now we burn back. The voice was Roan's. But the signal now belonged to Eli. 3 days later, the Ashari Empire was on the brink of rupture. The news feeds trembled with contradiction. On some Ashari core worlds, martial law had already been declared. Others descended into riots, protesters spraying human slogans across pristine crystal towers, shouting Earth's name, demanding answers from ministers who had only ever known the lie. On one moon Vosket, a group of university students gathered in the streets, holding up makeshift signs. Where is Earth? Say truth matters. And the most dangerous of all, we remember Maddox. Asharian forces arrived. 37 students were killed. The footage leaked. The protest tripled in size the next day. Meanwhile, Eli stayed in the shadows. He'd hidden the courier ship in the dust belt of a rogue planet. No suns, no signals, just silence. He couldn't risk being found, not yet. The Ashari were surely hunting him. But so were others. He sat in the dark, sleepless, jaw clenched, watching the galaxy unravel. One terminal played Roan's final broadcast on a loop. Another monitored encrypted comms from Ashari descent groups. A third scanned the stars for movement. He hadn't eaten in 36 hours, but he didn't care. His mind was full, overfull, not just with data, but with rage. And guilt. He could still see Roan's eyes in the moment before the end, calm, defiant, certain. You have to live, Roan had said. But why? To watch a dying galaxy fumble with the truth, to bear the burden of a species gone, to carry the ashes of a legacy that was too dangerous to ever rise again? What kind of victory was this? Eli's hands curled into fists. This wasn't survival, this was punishment. By the end of the week, 3 major galactic factions had broken their silence. The Ziran Union, long a political opponent of the Ashari, issued a formal demand for an independent investigation into the human eradication. For the first time in 1,000 years, the word genocide was used in an interstellar council, the Valk Syndicate. A powerful criminal alliance that had long fed off the Ashari's empire building issued no statement. But their ships began repositioning near Ashari trade lines. The Hilarians, known for their spiritual neutrality, issued a short and chilling public statement. If these truths are real, then the Ashari gods have lied. The Empire's grip was cracking. And still the transmission played. Eli's first call came on the 8th day. He almost didn't answer. The comms panel lit up with an anonymous handshake request. No data trace. No origin point. Just a single message. You're not alone. He tapped the accept key. A woman's voice spoke. You don't know me. Name's Commander Mira Rel, Earthborn, Vault 18. Eli's breath caught. That vault was marked unrecoverable, he said. I know. That's what they wanted. We were buried under Martian rock so deep it took 30 years for the AI to wake us. I had 50 in my unit. 12 made it out. We've been watching. Eli leaned forward. Watching? Waiting, Mira corrected. For what? For someone like Roan. For a signal that Earth wasn't just dead, it was remembered. Eli didn't speak. Then she said, We saw your upload. You saved the archive. You carried it. You bore it. That makes you more than a survivor, Eli. What does it make me? He asked bitterly. She paused. It makes you the voice of ghosts. They met 5 days later on a derelict orbital station drifting in a dead system. Mira arrived with 2 others. Both human, both from different vaults Eli never knew existed. All of them bore that same tired weight in their eyes, the weight of carrying the past on their backs. They brought with them a copy of Roan's full neural sync logs, footage, thoughts, tactical predictions, even archived memories. Eli plugged them into the ship's terminal. Roan's voice filled the room. If anyone hears this, it means we failed. Or we succeeded too well. Either way, don't mourn us. We didn't die to be pitied. We died so you'd remember that we were never meant to disappear quietly. Tell them. Show them. And if they still don't believe, make them. The Ashari didn't sit idle. When the first broadcast couldn't be silenced, they shifted tactics. They launched a media campaign claiming that Roan Maddox had been a rogue AI, his entire rebellion simulated by a corrupted military construct. They claimed Earth had imploded due to its own madness, but the footage was too clean, the voice too raw, the documents too official. The lie couldn't hold, so they changed tactics. Again, they began assassinating anyone who said, "We remember." In a single day, 17 human-descended speakers on neutral colonies were killed. Bombings, disappearances, accidents. The tactic backfired. The message spread faster, in blood. Now Eli and Mira formed a quiet network. They didn't call it a resistance, they didn't need to. They just connected the dots, survivor cells, archive holders, silent sympathizers buried deep in Ashari worlds, AI constructs hidden for centuries, still loyal to Earth Command. Systems. Each new node was a spark. Eli never claimed leadership. He just kept walking the dark, uploading, sending, telling the truth. Some called him a terrorist. Some called him a saint. He didn't care. He didn't need to be loved. He just needed to be believed. On the 30th, day after the moon's destruction, the unthinkable happened. An Ashari general defected. Her name was Valari Nem, commander of Sector 4's Outer Fleet. She broadcast a statement live across dozens of Ashari systems. "I've seen the files. They are real. We lied. We killed Earth. And we've been killing its memory ever since. I won't be part of this anymore." She disappeared hours later. Some say she went into hiding. Others say she was killed by her own staff. Either way, it was too late. Her confession became the next virus. It was translated into 20 languages, played on every moon where humans had once lived. Her last words were carved into the wall of an abandoned station. "Forgive us, or don't, but never forget." Eli couldn't sleep that night. He lay in his bunk, staring at the ceiling of the courier ship. Roan's ring hung from his neck, a piece of Earth, a piece of the past. He thought about Mira, about the voices reaching out from vaults once thought silent, about the protests, the blood, the fear, about how it wasn't over, about how this was just the second beginning, and it terrified him, because he didn't want to be the center of it. He didn't want to be a symbol. He just wanted to live, but symbols didn't get to sleep and survivors didn't get to hide. He sat up, walked to the console and opened a new transmission, video only. His face filled the screen, hollow-cheeked, fire-eyed, unapologetically human. "You don't know me. My name is Eli. I was born in a vault meant to be forgotten. I carry the voice of a man who refused to be silent. His name was Roan Maddox. His name was Earth. And if you're watching this, you remember. That means they've already lost." He hit send, then sat back alone again, but no longer unheard.